Chapter 1. The Soulless Contract. Drizzle tapped gently against the office window on the 72nd floor of the Walker Tech Tower, where Andrew Walker, 34, sat motionless in a black leather chair. The glow from his computer screen cast a cold light across his face, sculpted and unmoving like stone. His deep blue eyes, once adored by many, were now void of life. In front of him was a medical report. Stark black and white words sliced through his thoughts like a blade. Brain tumor. Inoperable. Estimated time remaining. 12 to 24 months. Andrew's hands gripped the arms of his chair, nails digging into flesh. Death. He had never imagined it would come this close, at least not to someone like him, a tech billionaire, a man who controlled everything from stock markets to the hearts of those around him. But now it was all crumbling. He wasn't afraid of dying, or so he told himself. What he couldn't bear was the thought of being forgotten, Andrew Walker fading into oblivion as if he had never existed. A child, he muttered, voice hoarse. I need a child. Not for love, not for family, but to leave behind blood, a legacy, proof that he had once walked this earth. He didn't believe in treatment. He didn't believe in miracles. He believed in power, and that power would buy him someone to fulfill this final wish. A few blocks away, in a small, run-down apartment, 25-year-old Sienna Brooks sat beside her sister's hospital bed. Her hands, once graceful on the piano keys, now trembled as she wiped the sweat from Lily's forehead. The 16-year-old girl lay still, frail, eyes closed, breath faint. The doctors had been clear. Lily's leukemia required an expensive bone marrow transplant, and time was running out. Sienna had already sold nearly everything. Her old piano, her performance gowns, even the dream of one day playing at Carnegie Hall. But it still wasn't enough. Her phone vibrated. A strange voice came through. Andrew Walker's attorney. Miss Brooks, we have an offer that could change your life. Sienna frowned, heart pounding. She didn't trust pretty promises. But when the figure $5 million was mentioned, her breath caught in her throat. Enough to save Lily. Enough to give her sister a future. And in exchange, she asked, voice trembling yet firm, a contract to carry and give birth to Mr. Andrew Walker's child. Sienna clutched the phone, heart clenching. She wanted to scream, to say no. But the image of Lily, pale and weak, silenced her. I need time to think. 24 hours, came the cold reply. You don't have much time, Miss Brooks. The meeting took place in a lifeless conference room at Walker Tech headquarters. Sienna walked in, her thin coat no match for the icy air conditioning. Andrew sat at the head of the table, sharp in a black suit, his eyes as cold as a void. He didn't greet her, didn't smile. He simply pushed a folder across the table. The contract, he said, voice deep and emotionless. You'll live in my estate, carry the child, give birth. I'll pay $5 million upon the child's delivery. All of your sister's medical expenses will be covered up front. That's all. Sienna flipped through the pages, each clause cut like a blade. No claim to any rights beyond money, no emotional attachment to the child, no contact with him once her duty was done. She bit her lip, heart aching. She wasn't someone who gave in easily, but the image of Lily flashed through her mind, the weak smile that still clung to her face in pain. Sienna swallowed her pride. What do you see me as? She asked quietly, sharply. A baby-making machine? Andrew's lip curled into a humorless smile. You're part of a deal. Do your job. Get paid. Don't expect anything more. He tapped his fingers on the table, each tap a blow to her dignity. In his mind, she was nothing more than a tool. He didn't care who she was, what she loved, or how much this hurt her. Death was counting down, and he had no time for feelings. Sienna stared into his eyes, searching for a trace of humanity, but found only emptiness. She thought of Lily, of the afternoons spent playing piano to make her sister smile, of their shared dream, standing in a concert hall under golden light, playing her own symphony. I'm doing this for her, she told herself, but I won't let him crush my spirit. With a trembling hand, she picked up the pen and signed her name. Tears welled up, but she bit her lip to stop them. I agree, she said. voice steady though her heart was breaking. Andrew didn't respond. He simply nodded to his lawyer. Prepare the paperwork. She moves into the estate tomorrow. He stood and walked away without looking back. In his mind it was done. A flawless transaction. But deep within his chest, somewhere he never dared look, a flicker of unease stirred. Sienna's fierce gaze, if only for a moment, had struck something unnamed in him. Sienna left the room, her steps heavy. She clutched the contract like it weighed 1,000 pounds. She felt as if she had just sold a piece of her soul. But when she thought of Lily, she whispered to herself, "I'll survive. For her, I will." Outside, the rain kept falling, and within her a small flame still burned. You're watching Soul Stories, where every tale whispers of love, healing, and hope. If you believe that even the smallest act of kindness can change a life, and that love often arrives when we least expect it, don't forget to subscribe and be part of our journey. Now stay with us. The story is just beginning. Chapter 2, The Frozen Wall. Andrew Walker's mansion sat atop a quiet hill on the outskirts of town, surrounded by towering pine trees and a cold gray stone wall. From the outside, it resembled a modern palace, its massive glass windows reflecting the crimson hues of the sunset. But as Sienna Brooks passed through the heavy iron gates, a suffocating sensation wrapped around her. It was as if the very air inside this house had been drained of life. Her luggage consisted of just one small suitcase, containing a few changes of clothes and a folder of sheet music, remnants of her once free-spirited life. The housekeeper, Mrs. Helen, a stern-faced woman in her 50s, led Sienna up to a second-floor room. "Miss Brooks, this is where you'll be staying," she said flatly. "Mr. Walker has a few rules you must follow." She handed Sienna a neatly typed sheet of paper. Sienna scanned it. "Do not enter the study or the third floor. Do not ask questions about Mr. Walker's personal life. Only appear in the dining room when summoned. No noise, no disturbances." The list went on, each line like a chain tightening around her. Sienna pressed her lips together, swallowing the sting of humiliation. "I understand," she replied, her voice soft but tense. When Mrs. Helen left, Sienna sat on the unfamiliar bed, her eyes sweeping across the room. It was luxuriously furnished, but devoid of warmth. No paintings, no flowers, only cold white walls. She felt like a prisoner in a gilded cage. In his study, Andrew sat beneath the dim glow of a desk lamp, his chiseled features cast in harsh shadow. A large screen in front of him displayed shifting stock data, but he wasn't paying attention. His mind was consumed by the ticking of the clock, each second dragging him closer to death. He hated Sienna's presence in his home, hated the way she disrupted the tightly controlled world he had built. "She's just part of the contract," he told himself again. But the truth was simpler and crueler. He didn't want anyone stepping into his world, a world where he could pretend everything was still under control. He stood up, intending to pour himself a glass of whiskey to dull the persistent ache in his head. But as he reached the staircase, he froze. A mournful piano melody floated up from the living room, each note a gentle ripple on a still lake. Sienna was seated at the old grand piano, the only piece in the mansion he hadn't replaced. Her hands moved gracefully over the keys, her brown hair falling loose around her face. Her eyes were distant, full of sorrow, yet rich with emotion. She was playing Clair de Lune by Debussy, soft and aching, like a wordless story of grief and hope. Andrew stood silently in the hallway's shadows, eyes narrowing. He wanted to march over, to yell that she had no right to touch the piano, that she wasn't allowed to break the silence of his home. The music felt like an intrusion, as though she were reaching into the locked vault of his mind, where he had buried every trace of feeling. "She's just a surrogate," he reminded himself, fists clenching. "She has no right to move me." "Miss Brooks," he said sharply, voice slicing through the melody. Sienna jumped, her fingers halting on the keys. The music cut short. She looked up and met his icy gaze. "Don't make noise," he said, each word like a blade. "I don't want to hear a single sound in this house unless I allow it." Sienna felt her chest tighten. His words weren't just a command. They were a denial of her very presence. She wanted to respond, to explain that the piano was the only thing keeping her sane in this oppressive house. But instead, she bit her lip, swallowing the urge to fight back. "I'm sorry," she said quietly, yet with quiet resolve. "I won't play again." Andrew turned and walked away, never glancing back. But in that fleeting moment when their eyes had met, Sienna had seen something. Not just coldness, but a deeper pain hiding in his gaze. "He's hurting," she thought, "but I won't let his cruelty break me." She stood, closed the piano lid gently, but inside she knew she wouldn't give up. Music was her breath, and somehow she would find a way for it to reach him, whether he wanted it to or not. Back in the study, Andrew sat down again, his glass of whiskey trembling slightly in his hand. Sienna's music still echoed in his mind, no matter how hard he tried to silence it. He hated this feeling, this sense that something was beginning to crack the frozen wall he had built around his soul. "She means nothing," he muttered, but the certainty was no longer there. Outside, the rain kept falling, and somewhere in the cold stillness of that mansion, a flicker of light had sparked, though Andrew wasn't ready to admit it. Chapter 3. Traces of the Past. On the fifth day in Andrew Walker's mansion, Sienna began to grow accustomed to the suffocating silence of the place. The white walls, the long, soundless hallways, and the cold stares of Mrs. Helen, the housekeeper, made her feel like a ghost. But Sienna refused to let herself drown in loneliness. Every morning she called Lily. Her sister's frail but bright voice lifted her spirit as Lily excitedly shared updates now that treatment had begun, thanks to the money from the contract. "Sienna, I drew a picture today," Lily chirped over the phone. "When you come back, I'll show it to you." Those words became Sienna's lifeline, the reason she pressed forward despite the heaviness in her chest. That afternoon, while wandering through the mansion to pass the time, Sienna found herself at the end of the third-floor hallway, an area strictly off-limits per Andrew's rules. There, she noticed an old wooden door, not locked but left slightly ajar, almost as if inviting her in. Curiosity nudged her. She gently pushed it open and stepped into a small, dust-covered room filled with keepsakes. A faded photo of a gentle-looking woman with a warm smile, an unfinished painting of a garden bursting with flowers, and a wooden box full of handwritten letters. Sienna picked up one and read the firm yet emotional script. "My love, I once thought the world would be ours, but perhaps fate had other plans." The letter wasn't signed, but every word ached with sorrow. She stood there in silence, heart tight with emotion. The cold, harsh man she faced each day, he had once known love and loss. The woman in the photograph reminded her of her own mother, who used to play piano lullabies to soothe her and Lily to sleep. "He used to be someone else," Sienna whispered, gently returning the letter. She realized then, Andrew wasn't only imprisoned by illness, but also locked within his own pain. That evening, at dinner, Sienna made a decision. She would try to chip away at the wall he'd built around himself. Andrew sat at the head of the table, silently eating, eyes fixed on the iPad filled with corporate data. Sienna inhaled deeply, gathering her courage. "I found a room on the third floor," she said softly but clearly. "There was a photo. Who was the woman?" The air froze. Andrew looked up, his deep blue eyes flaring with rage. He slammed the iPad down on the table with a thud, making Sienna jump. "You have no right to go through my life," he barked, his voice sharp as steel. "Who do you think you are? You're a surrogate, nothing more. Don't overstep." Sienna bit her lip, his harshness slicing through her. But instead of lashing back, she met his gaze and searched for the light in his darkness. "I'm sorry," she said quietly, voice calm though her heart trembled. "I just thought maybe you needed someone to listen." Andrew said nothing. He stood and walked out of the dining room, his steps heavy. Sienna remained seated, her hands clenched on the table. She felt like she'd touched a wound so deep it still bled, but she didn't regret it. She had seen the pain in him, and her compassion whispered, "He's not cruel. He's just lost, and I will be patient because he deserves that." That night, as darkness fell, Sienna lay in bed, her thoughts lingering on the memory room, the letter, the painting. What had turned Andrew into the man he was today? Meanwhile, in the study, Andrew sat alone, whiskey in hand, untouched. The echoes of Claire de Lune, the piece Sienna had played days ago, still rang in his mind. It reminded him of his mother, the only person who had ever loved him unconditionally. She too played the piano. She used to sit at the same old instrument in the living room, singing him lullabies during sleepless nights. Why does she make me remember what I tried to forget, he wondered, his hand tightening around the glass. He was furious at Sienna for trespassing into his past, but more than that, he was shaken, because somehow she saw through him, and that terrified him. The next morning, Sienna walked into the living room and froze. The old piano was gone. In its place stood a gleaming, brand-new grand piano, jet black, glistening in the soft morning sun. On its lid rested a small card. No words, only Andrew's signature. Sienna reached out and touched the keys, her fingers trembling. She didn't know why he had done this, but she felt it, a flicker of warmth, a crack in the frozen wall. She sat down, played a single, simple note, and smiled. "Thank you," she whispered, knowing he wouldn't hear. But deep inside, she made a promise. She would be patient, and through her music, she would reach his heart, note by note. Chapter 4. The First Warmth. 2 months had passed since Sienna first stepped into Andrew Walker's mansion. Though the place remained cold and distant, its silence had become familiar. She had learned to walk quietly across marble hallways, careful never to disturb Andrew, who always seemed lost in a world of his own. But every day she called Lily, her sister's voice now stronger, filled with hope, thanks to the treatment made possible by the contract. "Sienna, I ate a whole bowl of porridge today." Lily beamed through the phone. Sienna smiled, her sacrifices no longer feeling meaningless. Still, a hollow space lingered in her heart. Andrew's unyielding coldness, like an invisible wall that made her feel as though she didn't truly exist within the walls of his home. That morning, she received a call from Andrew's private doctor asking her to come in for a checkup. Sitting in the sterile, white examination room, she clasped her hands tightly, nerves buzzing as the doctor studied the ultrasound image. "Congratulations, Miss Brooks," he said, a rare smile spreading across his serious face. "You're pregnant with twins. Both babies are healthy." Sienna froze, heart pounding. Twins. 2 tiny lives growing inside her. A miracle blooming in the middle of so much darkness. She placed her hand gently over her belly and whispered, "You'll be okay, I promise." Back at the mansion, Sienna found Andrew in the living room, standing near the grand piano he had gifted her weeks ago. He wore a black shirt with the sleeves rolled up, his expression as unreadable as ever. She drew a deep breath, deciding to share the news. "Andrew," she said gently but clearly, "the doctor said I'm pregnant with twins. They're both healthy." He turned to glance at her, his eyes betraying no emotion. "Good," he replied flatly, as if commenting on a quarterly earnings report. "Just stick to the contract. Everything will be fine." Sienna bit her lip, the chill of his indifference cutting deeper than she'd expected. She had hoped, just a little, that this news might soften him. Before she could respond, Andrew stepped toward the dining table and set down a stack of handwritten sheet music. On the cover, in his bold handwriting, were the words, "Lullaby for Baby." Sienna picked it up, her fingers trembling. The notes were simple, but full of feeling, like a gentle lullaby written just for the 2 unborn children. She looked up at him, but he had already turned away, as if unable or unwilling to face her. "Thank you," she said, voice thick with emotion. "May I play it for you?" Andrew froze, hand tightening on the back of a chair. He wanted to say no, to preserve the distance between them. But something in her voice, so sincere, so warm, stilled his tongue. "As you wish," he said, voice cold but not sharp. He sat on the sofa several feet from the piano, his gaze fixed on the window, pretending not to care. Sienna took her seat at the piano. Her hands gently met the keys. Lullaby for Baby filled the room, clear, tender, full of life. She played with her heart open, pouring into each note her hope for the 2 little souls within her, and perhaps for the man sitting across from her too. For the first time, Andrew didn't walk away. He stayed. Slowly, his eyes drifted from the window to her. In that moment, the icy blue of his gaze softened. Not completely, but just enough. A faint flicker, a fragile light, like the melody had brushed against a place long locked away. As the final note lingered in the air, Sienna looked up and met his eyes. She offered a small, genuine smile. "This piece, it's beautiful," she said softly. "I think the babies will love it." Andrew didn't respond, only nodded slightly. But Sienna noticed the change. He didn't turn away. He didn't scold her. For the first time, she felt he was truly there. Not a ghost, but a man. From that day on, Sienna began caring for Andrew in her own quiet way, even if he didn't acknowledge it. One morning, she quietly prepared a simple breakfast. Toast with strawberry jam she guessed he might like, and a cup of black coffee, just the way she had seen him drink it every day. She placed the tray on the dining table with a small note beside it. "Don't forget to take your meds." When Andrew walked in, he paused, eyeing the tray with a puzzled look. "You don't have to do this," he said. His voice was still cool but lacked the usual edge. "It's not part of your duties." "I know," Sienna replied softly, "but I want to, because I think you could use someone who cares, even just a little." She met his gaze, not asking for anything in return. Andrew said nothing. He simply picked up the coffee, but his eyes lingered on her, faintly flickering, as if her words had grazed a place he had tried so hard to bury. Inside him, her kindness felt foreign, unfamiliar. He asked himself, is she doing this because of the contract or something else? He didn't have the answer. All he knew was he couldn't afford to be weak. He had built a wall of ice to protect himself. Yet her small gestures, the lullaby, the breakfast, the note, were becoming cracks in that wall. He feared it, and yet he couldn't deny it made him feel alive. In her room, Sienna sat in silence, thinking of the way his eyes had softened during the lullaby. If I can make him feel cared for, she thought, even just a little, I'll keep trying. She didn't expect him to change overnight, but her warm heart believed that small acts of kindness could slowly melt the cold within him, one layer at a time. Chapter 5. Facing Death. 3 months since Sienna had arrived at Andrew Walker's mansion, the air inside had grown slightly less suffocating. Just slightly. Her small gestures, breakfast trays left on the table, handwritten reminders to take his medicine, had become routine, even though Andrew never responded. Sienna didn't expect gratitude. She only hoped her quiet acts could bring a sliver of light to a man shadowed by illness. Every day she still called Lily, who now spoke with more strength, more joy, talking about new drawings or her dreams of a bright future. "Sienna, I want to paint you playing the piano on a big stage," Lily said one morning, her voice full of life. Sienna smiled, her heart warmed even in the cold mansion. One afternoon, with the golden hue of sunset blanketing the back garden, Sienna saw Andrew standing alone beneath a row of rose bushes, his eyes distant. He wore a gray sweater, hands in his pockets, his posture still, like a man quietly counting down his remaining days. Sienna walked toward him, her canvas shoes barely brushing the soft grass. "Andrew," she said gently, "would you like to go for a walk? The garden's beautiful, but it seems like you rarely come out here." Andrew glanced at her, mildly surprised, but he didn't refuse. "All right," he said, his voice flat, but the edge from the early days was gone. They walked side by side in silence, accompanied only by the crunch of leaves beneath their feet and birds chirping overhead. The garden was filled with roses and white chrysanthemums, clearly well cared for. Sienna paused near a cluster of blooms, her fingers brushing a soft petal. "Who planted these?" she asked, curiosity in her voice. "My mother," Andrew replied, his tone dropping low. He stopped, eyes fixed on the flowers, as if seeing something far away. "She loved this garden. When I was a kid, she'd bring me out here, taught me how to water the plants, trim the branches, but she died when I was 10. Sienna felt her heart tighten. She said nothing, only nodded gently to show she was listening. They kept walking, the silence between them now filled with quiet understanding. And then, Sienna asked the question she had long held back. "Andrew," she said, soft but resolute, "if you had only 100 days left to live, what would you want to do?" Andrew stopped. He turned to her, pain flashing in his eyes as if she had touched a wound still raw. "I don't know," he said, voice raspy. "I've never lived for myself. Everything I've done was to build this company, to control every piece of my life. But now, I don't know what I want." He looked away, his hands clenched in his pockets. "Maybe just to get it over with." His words were a dagger, but Sienna didn't let herself sink into despair. Instead, she stepped closer, her eyes warm with truth. "When I was a little girl," she said, "I dreamed of playing piano at Carnegie Hall. My mom used to say it was where musical dreams became immortal. Life was hard, but I held on to that dream because it reminded me that every day was still worth living." She smiled, her eyes bright. "Maybe you can find something, anything, that makes each day meaningful." Andrew looked at her, struck by her quiet optimism. It was strange, comforting, and unsettling all at once. "I envy you," he admitted, voice low. "You face everything, poverty, your sister's illness, and you still smile. I'm scared. Scared I'll leave and nothing will remain except my name on paper." Sienna gently took his hand, not tightly, just enough for him to feel her presence. "You don't have to leave behind the world," she said. "Sometimes just being present in one moment is enough." Andrew didn't pull away. He let her hand rest in his, and inside him something stirred, a small wave he couldn't ignore. He was beginning to feel connected to Sienna, but at the same time, he fought it. "I don't deserve happiness," he told himself. "I won't be here much longer. If I let myself feel this, it'll only make dying harder." Sienna watched him quietly, heart aching for the man who feared not just death, but being forgotten. "I want him to know life is still worth living," she thought. She didn't expect him to change overnight, but she was determined to help him rediscover meaning, even in small moments like this, a walk in the garden, a conversation about dreams, a silent hand to hold. As they returned to the house, the sun had already set, but Sienna felt something different, a fragile connection forming. She didn't know if Andrew could feel it, but she believed that with patience, one day he just might. Still following the story? If this story found you outside of Soul Stories, we invite you home, to where every touching tale begins with truth, hope, and heart. Chapter 6. Love Begins to Bloom. 4 months had passed since Sienna entered Andrew Walker's mansion, and what was once a place of cold silence now flickered with warmth, faint but real. Every day she called Lily, hearing her sister's radiant laughter as she talked about new paintings or the joy of walking again after weeks of treatment. "Sienna, I dreamed you were playing piano for the twins," Lily exclaimed one morning, and Sienna smiled, her heart full. Every sacrifice suddenly felt worth it. But what made her heart pound wasn't just Lily's cheerful updates, it was Andrew's gaze. No longer cold and cutting, it had softened, as if he were learning how to live again. They made a quiet pact, to live each day as if it were a precious gift that could disappear at any moment. One morning, sunlight poured through the kitchen window, lighting up the white porcelain bowls like crystal. "Today we're cooking together," Sienna declared, eyes sparkling. Andrew raised an eyebrow, skeptical. "I don't know how," he said dryly. Sienna simply laughed and handed him a carrot and a knife. "Then learn, I'll teach you." The kitchen filled with the rhythmic sound of chopping, Sienna's giggles blending with Andrew's clumsy attempts to cut the carrot. "Like this," she said, taking his hand in hers and guiding his movements. Her fingers brushed against his, warm, gentle, and Andrew froze for a moment, his heart suddenly pounding. They made a simple spaghetti dish, but when they sat down to eat, Andrew took each bite slowly, savoring not just the food, but the moment. "Better than any restaurant," he mumbled. Sienna beamed, eyes bright as stars. They went together to prenatal appointments, sitting side by side in silence, watching the monitor as 2 tiny lives appeared on the screen. Sienna held Andrew's hand, feeling him squeeze hers when the doctor said, "Both babies are doing well." Andrew didn't speak, but his eyes shimmered strangely, like he was memorizing every second. On the way home, they stopped at a baby shop, choosing 2 tiny onesies and a pair of soft blue booties. "They'll wear these, right?" Andrew asked hesitantly. Sienna nodded, hiding the flicker of pain behind her smile. "Will he be there to see them wear it?" The nursery slowly took shape under their hands. They painted the walls a soft sky blue, stuck glow-in-the-dark stars to the ceiling, and built the crib together. When Andrew dropped a screw, Sienna burst out laughing. He grabbed a piece of dried paint and tossed it at her playfully. "Who said you could laugh at me?" he teased, his voice unusually light. Sienna fired back, and the room echoed with their laughter. Two adults giggling like children. Later, they collapsed onto the floor, backs resting against the wall. Sienna looked at Andrew, sweat on his brow, and thought how beautiful this moment was, even as time slipped too quickly through their fingers. They watered flowers in the garden his mother once loved. Sienna aimed the hose and soaked Andrew, who stood there stunned. "Sienna!" he shouted, then laughed, grabbing the hose and chasing her. Water flew everywhere as they fell onto the grass, breathless from laughter. Andrew lay beside her, watching her eyes sparkle beneath the sun, her wet hair clinging to her skin. He reached for her hand, pulled her close, and they lay together, listening to their own hearts. "You make me forget everything," he whispered, voice raw. Sienna held his hand tighter. She didn't speak. She just wanted to stay in this moment forever. But not all moments were full of joy. Some nights Andrew's headaches returned, fierce and relentless. Sienna would wake to find him by the window, pale, trembling. She never said a word, just sat beside him, arms wrapping gently around his tense frame. "Sienna, go back to sleep," he'd whisper weakly. But she'd shake her head, rest her cheek on his shoulder. "I'm here," she'd whisper back, and he'd let her stay, let her warmth soothe the ache he couldn't escape. In those moments, she felt his vulnerability like a thin thread, and the fear of losing him sliced through her like a blade. One night, under a silver moon, they stood in the garden, hand in hand. Moonlight traced the sharp lines of Andrew's face, now marked with fatigue. He tightened his grip on her fingers, pulled her into his arms, and whispered with trembling breath, "You make me want to live one more day, Sienna. Every day with you makes me want just one more." It wasn't a grand declaration, but it was a confession, and it broke Sienna's heart wide open. She wrapped her arms around him, silent tears sliding down her cheeks. She knew then, he loved her. And she also knew death was still watching from the shadows. In Andrew's heart, love for Sienna burned like a flame, bright but threatened by the dark fog of illness. "If I love her, it'll hurt more to leave," he thought. "But how can I not love her?" He wanted to hold her forever, but the fear of dying stopped him from imagining anything beyond tomorrow. In his arms, Sienna felt a joy so complete it scared her. "I love him," she thought, "but do we have enough time to live this love?" She wanted to believe in forever, but every wince, every quiet groan of pain from Andrew reminded her. Time might not be on their side. They never spoke of the future. They didn't talk about what would happen after the babies came, or if Andrew wouldn't be there to see them. Instead, they held hands, cooked together, laughed in the sun, and embraced through the pain. Each moment became a precious gem, cherished deeply, even as sadness hummed beneath, like a soft, lingering melody that would never fully fade. Chapter 7. Hope Awakens. That morning, Andrew Walker's mansion was bathed in gentle autumn sunlight, as if foreshadowing a miracle. Sienna stood in the kitchen, brewing peppermint tea for Andrew, smiling as she thought back on the days they had spent together. Clumsy breakfasts, water fights in the garden, quiet embraces during his headaches. He had just received a call from the hospital. The doctor wanted to see them for a routine checkup. Probably for the babies, she thought, placing a hand over her belly, feeling the two tiny lives growing stronger each day. Still, a quiet anxiety lingered in her chest. Every hospital visit made her fear bad news about Andrew. Andrew stepped into the kitchen, his hair tousled from sleep, his eyes softer than ever when they landed on her. "Ready?" he asked, voice warm and low. Sienna nodded and handed him the tea. "Drink this, then we'll go." He took a sip, grimaced at the lemony tang, but drank it all anyway. She laughed and he smiled faintly. They left together, hand in hand, like it was the most natural thing in the world, even for just a short drive. At the hospital, Dr. Richard, the physician who had been overseeing Andrew's case, greeted them with an expression Sienna didn't expect. He looked hopeful. He invited them to sit, opened a thick folder, and began speaking slowly but firmly. Mr. Walker, I have good news. Your latest MRI results show the tumor's growth has slowed significantly, something extremely rare. More importantly, there's a new experimental surgical technique from the US that may be able to remove it. It's not guaranteed, but you have a real chance at survival. Sienna felt her heart stop for a beat. She turned to Andrew and saw him frozen, hands gripping the arms of the chair, eyes wide and hollow. You mean I could live? He asked, voice trembling, like he feared the answer would vanish the moment he said it aloud. Dr. Richard nodded, smiling. Yes, we need to schedule the surgery soon, but this is the best chance we've had. The room exploded into emotion. Sienna burst into tears, laughing and sobbing all at once. She threw herself into Andrew's arms, clutching him tightly, her breath catching in her throat. Andrew, you're going to live, she wept, pressing her face to his chest. We're going to live. Andrew wrapped his arms around her, hands shaking, silent tears falling into her hair. He said nothing, just held her like if he let go, the moment would vanish. For a while, the world disappeared. There was only them. Two people who had once seen time as an enemy now clung to hope like a miracle. They didn't drive straight home. Instead, they stopped in the flower garden behind the mansion, where the roses and white chrysanthemums still bloomed. In the warm light, Sienna pulled Andrew down onto the grass, their fingers still laced together. She wiped her tears and laughed through them. I can't believe this. I thought we only had months. Days. Andrew looked at her, his eyes gleaming like life had just returned to them. I didn't believe it either, he said hoarsely. But now, I want to think about everything we might have. They talked about the future for the first time. Andrew held her hand, his eyes full of wonder. I want to raise our kids with you, Sienna. I want to teach them to run on the beach, build sandcastles. I want to see them grow up. I want to hear you play the piano for them. His words were a promise, gentle but powerful, and Sienna's heart melted. She cupped his hand to her cheek and whispered, We'll have a lifetime, Andrew. I want all those things with you. But inside Andrew, radiant hope wrestled with fear. What if the surgery fails? What if I leave her in pain, he thought. But I want to try. For her. Even if this miracle might vanish like mist. Looking into Sienna's glowing eyes gave him the courage to fight, not just for himself, but for her, their children, and the dream they had finally dared to imagine. At that moment, Sienna felt limitless joy, like the whole world had opened up. I'll stay with him, no matter what happens, she promised silently. She knew the surgery was risky, but her heart believed that as long as they were together, they could face anything. She rested her head on his shoulder, smiling as tears silently fell. They sat in the sunlit garden speaking of simple dreams, a home full of laughter, trips to the beach, nights with lullabies and piano music. For the first time, they allowed themselves to dream, and even though fear lingered, hope had finally risen, like sunlight breaking through petals, chasing the shadows away. The day of the surgery. Today was the day. Andrew's surgery was underway. Sienna sat alone in the hospital waiting room, hands trembling, eyes fixed on the closed doors of the OR. The wall clock ticked painfully slow, each second stretching endlessly. 4 hours had passed, no news. The sterile air clung to her skin, making her shiver. Inside her was a storm of emotion, fear, hope, pain. She thought of Andrew's rare smile from the night before, his soft words. We'll take the kids to the beach, okay? I want to see them build sandcastles. Now that memory felt like a blade, sweet and unbearable. She closed her eyes and whispered a prayer. Please, God, save him. He suffered so much. Give him a chance to live, to love, to be a father. Her voice cracked. Tears spilled over. Sienna wasn't a religious woman, but today she placed all her faith in the divine, clinging to it like a lifeline in the middle of an ocean. To calm her shaking heart, she pulled out sheet music from her bag. Her fingers trembled as she began to write, note after note pouring from her soul. She titled it, A Second Breath, for Andrew, for hope, for the love she hadn't dared to speak until now. Every note was a prayer, a promise. I'll be with you no matter what. She imagined herself playing it at Carnegie Hall. Andrew in the front row, his eyes gentle the way they had been the night before. The thought made her smile through the tears and made her chest tighten. "You have to live, Andrew," she whispered. "You have to hear this." 12 hours passed. The door finally opened. Dr. Richard stepped out, removed his mask, his face weary but his eyes alight. "The surgery was a success. He's past the critical stage. We'll continue to monitor him, but things look very good." Sienna shot to her feet, her legs weak beneath her. She covered her face, crying uncontrollably, not from grief but from overwhelming joy. Tears gushed from her eyes like rain, her heart thundering in her chest. "Thank you, God. Thank you," she repeated as if afraid the moment might vanish. They led her into the recovery room. Andrew lay there, pale but sculpted as ever. His eyes fluttered open, and when they saw her, they lit up. "Sienna," he croaked, lifting a trembling hand. She rushed to him, grasping his hand, tears dripping onto his skin. "You scared the hell out of me," she choked out, laughing and sobbing all at once. "Don't ever do that again, okay?" Andrew smiled, weak but alive, and more beautiful than ever. "I promise. For you." Unable to hold back, Sienna leaned down and kissed him. A deep, raw, soul-burning kiss. It held every ounce of fear, hope, and love they had carried. His lips were cool, but his heart beat strong, matching hers perfectly. They kissed like it was the first time, and the last, and forever. As they pulled apart, Sienna whispered, "I wrote a piece for you. When you're better, I'll play it." Andrew gripped her hand tighter, his eyes gleaming. "I want to hear it, and I want to hear you play it every day for the rest of my life." You're watching Soul Stories exclusive to our channel. If you're still with us, drop a comment. We read and cherish them all. Subscribe to support more heartfelt, original stories. Thanks for being part of the Soul Stories family. Chapter 8, Torn Apart by a Misunderstanding. Just days after Andrew's successful surgery, his mansion overflowed with sunlight and hope. Each morning, Sienna woke with a lighter heart, feeling life returning in every breath Andrew took. She brewed his usual peppermint tea and smiled at the sight of him slowly regaining his strength. His deep blue eyes no longer shadowed, but bright every time they looked at her. They had begun dreaming of a future together, days spent with their children at the beach, nights filled with music and starlight in the nursery. After everything, Sienna finally believed that their love was ready to bloom, but she never saw the crack forming beneath the surface, one that would soon shatter everything. That morning, Andrew returned to Walker Tech for the first time since the surgery to attend a board meeting. "I need to handle a few things," he said, pressing a gentle kiss to her forehead, a gesture that had become second nature. "I'll be back soon." Sienna nodded, handing him a thermos of warm herbal tea. "Don't forget to drink it. You still need to rest." He smiled, warmth in his eyes, and left. A spontaneous idea bloomed in Sienna's heart. She would surprise him during his lunch break with a fresh cup of tea, a sweet reminder that she was always by his side, even now that he had stepped back from the edge of death. She arrived at Walker Tech carrying the warm thermos, her footsteps light with joy. Andrew's secretary greeted her with a familiar smile. "Mr. Walker's in his office, Miss Brooks. You can go right in." Sienna thanked her and walked down the glass hallway, heart racing with anticipation. But as she neared his office door, she froze. Through the slightly ajar door, she saw a woman, tall, blonde, immaculately dressed, leaning over Andrew from behind, arms wrapped around his shoulders. Her voice was soft, intimate. "Andrew, I heard the surgery went well. I know I made a mistake when I left, but maybe we can start over." Sienna recognized her instantly, Victoria, the ex-girlfriend who had vanished when Andrew was first diagnosed. Sienna's heart twisted violently. Her hands shook. She almost dropped the thermos. Then she heard Andrew's voice, sharp, cold. "Victoria, you don't understand. Yes, I hired Sienna to carry my child. She was part of a contract." Sienna felt as if the floor had disappeared beneath her. Those words, cold, clinical, sliced through her like glass. The nights they held each other through pain. The laughter in the garden. The dreams they dared to speak aloud. I thought he loved me, she thought, breath catching. But maybe I was just part of the deal. Tears blurred her vision as she turned and fled, unaware that Andrew's voice had trembled as he continued. Yes, she was part of a contract, but she became everything. I love her, Victoria. I won't let anyone, not even you, destroy what we have. But Sienna was already gone. The thermos hit the marble floor, shattering like her heart. The secretary called out, startled, but Sienna didn't stop. She ran, her tears glinting in the cruel daylight. Back at the mansion, Sienna stepped into the living room, her eyes landing on the black grand piano, where she had once played Lullaby for the Twins, where she had believed their love was real. She opened the piano bench, pulling out the silver bracelet Andrew had given her after his surgery. He had handed it to her with awkward tenderness, saying, "Think of this as a promise that we'll keep walking forward together." Now she clutched it tightly as tears splashed onto its polished surface. Then she placed it gently inside the bench, closing the lid like sealing a chapter of her life. "I was wrong," she whispered, her voice cracking. "I can't stay here." She packed a few clothes and scribbled a note to leave on the dining table. "Thank you for everything. I will bring the baby safely into this world. Please don't look for me." With a heart shattered but resilient, Sienna left the mansion and checked into a small roadside inn on the outskirts of town. The dim lights and weathered walls seemed the perfect refuge for her pain. Sitting alone on the narrow bed, she held her growing belly and whispered, "I'll be strong for you both." Though devastated, her kind soul bore no hatred for Andrew. She only wanted to protect her children and herself from more heartache. That evening, Andrew returned home, weary from his confrontation with Victoria. He had made it clear Sienna was the woman he loved, and Victoria had no place in his life. But Victoria's strange, triumphant smile lingered in his mind, stirring unease. "Sienna!" he called out as he stepped inside. No answer. He found the note on the table, and when he opened the piano bench and saw the bracelet, he staggered back, like the air had been sucked from his lungs. "Sienna," he whispered, clutching the bracelet, hands trembling. "She misunderstood." Rage and sorrow collided in him. He punched the wall, knuckles splitting, blood dripping, but it couldn't compare to the pain in his chest. "I hurt her. I didn't protect her. I can't lose her." He realized then, his careless words, though technically true, had destroyed the most precious thing in his life. He vowed to find her, no matter what it took. To tell her she wasn't part of a deal, she was his heart, his future. At the inn, Sienna sat by the window, trying to erase the image of Andrew and Victoria. "I thought he loved me," she whispered, tears slipping silently down her cheeks. "But maybe I was just a clause in a contract." Still, she didn't curse him. She couldn't. Her heart wasn't made for bitterness. Instead, she cradled her stomach and whispered to her unborn children, "We'll be okay, I promise." Her strength lay in her silence, in her quiet exit, in choosing peace over anger. That night, Andrew sat in the darkened living room, clutching the silver bracelet, eyes lost in the now empty garden where they used to laugh. Miles away, Sienna stared out the window of her tiny inn room, the moonlight catching the tears on her face. They were separated by misunderstanding, torn apart by unspoken truths. But the love they shared, though wounded, had not died. It still burned quietly, waiting for the moment it could be reignited. Chapter 9. Tragedy and Reconciliation. Rain poured relentlessly on the narrow road leading to the small inn on the outskirts of town, where Sienna Brooks had been hiding. It had been 3 days since she left Andrew Walker's mansion with a broken heart, and the dim yellow light of the cramped room could do nothing to ease her pain. Each night, she clutched her belly and whispered to her unborn twins, "Mommy will protect you, even if it's just the 3 of us." The image of Victoria embracing Andrew and his cold words, "She was part of a contract," still haunted her, a wound that refused to close. Though shattered, Sienna tried to be strong for her children, but grief and stress came in crashing waves, slowly drowning her. That afternoon, the storm intensified, but Sienna couldn't bear the suffocating air inside her room anymore. She pulled on a thin raincoat and stepped outside, hoping the chill of the rain would soothe her mind. She walked slowly down the muddy roadside, her thoughts drifting back to her days with Andrew. The laughter in the garden, holding hands under moonlight, the kiss after his surgery. I loved him, she whispered, as tears mingled with rain. Suddenly, a sharp pain stabbed her abdomen. She froze, clutching her belly for balance, but the slippery pavement gave way beneath her. She collapsed onto the cold, wet ground. No, the babies. She gasped, her voice barely audible, reaching out for something, anything, but the pain consumed her until everything went black. A nearby street vendor, an elderly man, saw her fall and rushed over. Miss, are you all right? He cried, kneeling beside her. Sienna, through the haze of pain, gripped his hand and murmured, Please, call Andrew Walker. This number. She summoned the last of her strength to recite his phone number, one she still remembered, despite trying to forget. The old man nodded and dialed immediately. Sir, a pregnant woman asked me to call you. She fell on Maple Road near the inn. You need to come quickly. Sienna slipped into unconsciousness, her final thought. Andrew, come, for the babies. At the mansion, Andrew sat in the quiet living room, staring at the silver bracelet Sienna had left in the piano bench. For 3 days he'd been hollow, searching desperately, but finding no trace of her. The note she left, Don't look for me, tormented him. I let her get hurt, he thought, gripping the bracelet until his knuckles turned white. I can't lose her. He blamed himself, letting Victoria in, speaking careless words that had ruined everything. Then his phone rang. The old man's urgent voice sliced through the silence. Andrew shot to his feet. Sienna! No! He cried and bolted from the house, driving through the pounding rain, his chest tight with dread. On Maple Road, he found her. A small crowd had gathered under a building's awning, sheltering Sienna's rain-soaked body. Her hair clung to her face, her skin pale, and her arms wrapped around her stomach like a desperate shield. Sienna! Andrew screamed, falling to his knees. He gathered her into his arms, feeling the coldness of her skin. Sienna, please wake up. Please! He carried her to his car and sped to the hospital, whispering over and over, Don't leave me, please don't leave me. At the hospital, doctors rushed her into the emergency room. Andrew stood outside, soaked and trembling, shirt clinging to him, hands shaking uncontrollably. I almost lost everything because of my stupidity, he whispered, guilt eating away at him. Every minute dragged like an eternity until a doctor finally emerged, face weary but relieved. She delivered early, but we were able to save both babies. They're in the NICU, but stable. She lost a lot of strength, but she's going to make it. Andrew nearly collapsed, tears bursting from his eyes. Tears of gratitude and sorrow all at once. He was led to the recovery room, where Sienna lay unconscious, her face pale but still breathtaking under the soft hospital lights. Her eyes fluttered open, cloudy and weak. Andrew? She whispered, voice dry and hoarse. He dropped to his knees beside the bed and took her hand, tears falling onto her skin. Sienna, I'm so sorry, he said, his voice shaking. I never saw you as part of a contract. You're everything to me. I told Victoria that. But you didn't hear. I'm so sorry for the pain I caused. Sienna stared at him, her own eyes wet with tears. She remembered the office, the heartbreak of hearing those words. But now, looking into his eyes, she saw the truth. Raw, desperate, and full of love. I thought I didn't matter to you, she said softly. Andrew shook his head, bringing her hand to his cheek. No, Sienna, you're the reason I survived surgery, the reason I want to live. Please let me be there. For you, for our children. Let me make this right. A faint smile touched her lips, fragile but real. She had suffered so much, but her gentle heart had never stopped believing in love. I love him, she thought, and I want us to be a family. She tightened her grip on his hand and whispered, Don't leave me again, Andrew. Her words were a bridge, mending what misunderstanding had torn apart. Andrew bent down and kissed her forehead, tears sliding down her temple. I won't, I swear, Sienna. I'll never let you go again. He stayed with her through every moment of recovery. Each morning he visited their newborns in the NICU, 2 tiny miracles sleeping peacefully behind glass. And every night he sat by Sienna's side, holding her hand, whispering promises. I'll be a better man, a real father, a real husband. Sienna, though still weak, felt hope return like sunlight breaking through the storm clouds. She forgave Andrew, not just out of love, but because she believed in what they could build together. Under the soft hospital glow, their hands intertwined. They were ready to face whatever came next, because their love, tested by tragedy, had survived. And it was stronger than ever. Chapter 10. The Reunion Symphony. 1 year after the rain-soaked tragedy that nearly tore them apart, the radiant lights of Carnegie Hall shone down on Sienna Brooks, now a world-renowned pianist. Seated at a gleaming grand piano, her fingers danced over the keys, playing a second breath, the piece she had composed on the night she waited for Andrew's surgery to end. Each note carried a story of love, loss, and rebirth, guiding every heart in the concert hall through her emotional journey. The hall was hushed, transfixed by the music, bold yet tender, aching yet full of hope. Sienna, dressed in a flowing white gown, played as if it were her last time touching the piano, pouring her soul into every measure. In the front row, Andrew Walker sat with their daughter Emma, nestled in his arms, his eyes never leaving Sienna. Little Emma, once a fragile preemie, now healthy and vibrant, clutched his finger and gazed wide-eyed at her mother. Beside them, Ethan, her twin brother, slept peacefully in the arms of Mrs. Helen, the former housekeeper turned loving grandmother. Andrew sat in silence, overwhelmed with quiet pride. She saved me, he thought, not just from death, but from the loneliness I thought would never leave. Every note Sienna played was a thread tying them back together, reminding him of late nights filled with pain and healing, of misunderstandings overcome, of love rediscovered when hope seemed lost. The audience had no idea that a year ago, this woman had lain in a recovery bed, frail but fierce, holding Andrew's hand and choosing forgiveness. They had raised their twins through long days in the NICU, slowly piecing together a family from fragments. Through it all, Sienna's warm heart never stopped giving. She mothered, she healed, and she never stopped playing. She turned pain into music, and now her lifelong dream of performing at Carnegie Hall had come true. But this wasn't just her dream. It belonged to all of them. Andrew, Emma, Ethan. Her music lit the way forward for their family. When the final note echoed into silence, the hall erupted with applause. Sienna stood and bowed, tears shimmering in her eyes. As she looked into the front row, she saw Andrew smiling at her with the same glowing warmth as he had when they once dreamed together in the garden. Emma waved excitedly and Sienna laughed, her heart overflowing. I found love. I found a family, she thought. Things I never dared to dream of. Suddenly, Andrew stood, still holding Emma, and made his way up to the stage. The audience fell silent, curious. He stopped beside Sienna, the stage lights bathing them in a golden glow, like a scene from a perfect painting. Then, with his daughter in one arm, he knelt and pulled a small box from his pocket. Inside, a diamond ring, not the silver bracelet from before, but a new promise. Sienna, he said, his voice deep and trembling, you gave me a second chance at life, not just with your love, but by never giving up on me. I want to spend the rest of my days loving and protecting you, Emma and Ethan. Will you marry me? The crowd held its breath. Sienna, tears falling freely, nodded with a radiant smile. We survived, she whispered, her voice choked with emotion. Now it's time to truly live. She extended her hand, and Andrew slipped the ring onto her finger. He pulled her into an embrace, Emma between them, giggling with delight. The stage lights sparkled on their little family, as if the entire world was blessing their reunion. They stood there hand in hand under the spotlight as the audience rose to its feet in a standing ovation. Sienna looked at Andrew and saw no trace of fear, only love and hope. Andrew looked at her and knew she was more than the woman who saved his life. She was the star that led him home. Their family, once nearly lost, now stood strong, reunited beneath the golden lights of Carnegie Hall, where Sienna's dream had finally come true and their love had become immortal.